Quest.
What's up, everybody? It's Kami and
Jason of the Storm.
And we're here with our second devlog.
Devlog number 2.
And we have finally decided on a game title.
Yeah, it's been months and months of us working on this game. I mean, not like so many months, but what we're at like 7-8 months now. And we've had like a couple that kind of stuck, but we didn't really like feel that great about it. So the main title is Kami Quest, right? Which is fairly obvious.
Fire.
Kami Quest.
Flames.
You know, we've talked about making a bigger game, but starting with a smaller game and building our way up to the bigger game. So for the smaller game, the subtitle of Kami Quest is Enter the Imagynasium.
I fucking love it. It sounds so nice.
Like, I keep thinking of, like, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, you know? I like that because it gives us the chance to make it into, like, a series without it being, like, a 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. Like, we don't have to have these, like, sequential numbers dictating which game is which. It'll just be like, oh, this is this chapter and this is this chapter.
Yeah, so let's dive into the devlog, and we're gonna backpedal a little bit. I mean, we're obviously a little farther into the game, but I think we want to kind of go from the start and then move to where we are now. So I thought it would be a good place to start was the player controller and the animations that I did, and then how we integrated it into Unity. And that was a whole complicated problem that I had to figure out. Basically, animations with like stretching and stuff like that with the character, it doesn't really implement into Unity that well. So I had to figure out how to do that. And luckily there's an add-on called Game Rig Tool. It allows you to basically convert your custom rig into a rig that Unity can use while keeping your stretching and your squashing and stuff.
Yeah, I'm still so curious about that because I feel like you handle so much of the animation side of things that you just kind of like give me FBX files and then I just implement them. And I don't really know what goes on the Blender side of things, but I remember we were definitely having some trouble with like stretching and squashing of bones and stuff, and then you just kind of used this add-on, and then the next series of files that you gave me worked. But I'm still just like so in the dark about like what's going on with that, because I'm not an animator, I'm the developer.
Yeah, so basically I use Auto Rig Pro to create my rigs. Those cannot go into Unity. Unity cannot detect like custom controllers and all that stuff. So basically what Game Rig Tool does is it creates a new rig, and it maps all the weight and stuff onto the bones, and then it prints the animations onto the new rig, which is like amazing. Also, when it comes to the animations and stuff, I wanted to dive a little deeper into the inspiration for the movement and stuff like that. One thing that comes to mind is the running animation for Sabbath is like a direct inspiration to how Ed runs in Ed, Edd n Eddy. He like runs with like his legs forward, and then his torso just kind of like slings back. And
it's like his upper body is just ragdoll and just like flopping along to his lower body, and it's so iconic. I always loved that run. Like everybody loves that run. I remember like imitating that run in school with my friends.
Yeah,
you know, just because it was so silly and fun to do.
Yeah, it really cemented into my mind like forever, and I was like, this would be such a cool run to do. And just like the animations in general are very Looney Tunes, exaggerated movements and stuff. I've never been really good at realistic movement when it comes to animation. So I kind of lean towards the more exaggerated, crazy movement.
Like you are like keyframing these animations by hand, and you are, you know, setting the pose for each of the keyframes. And, you know, we're not just using like a stock whatever animation pack from the Unity Asset Store or from Mixamo or whatever. Like these are all like handcrafted animations that are really specific to your ideas and what you're going for.
Yeah, handcrafted, artisanal, organic, cage-free,
stylized animations, cage-free.
So yeah, this is like a whole new realm for me when it comes to making animations. You know, I'm used to kind of doing everything in one set. You know, when it comes to a scene, I'm doing the running and then it transitions into the jumping and all that stuff.
Right, you're doing that all in like one timeline.
Yeah.
Right, you're not like blending the run animation to a stopping animation.
Yeah.
You're just animating a character running and then stopping.
Exactly. So I had to like kind of learn and teach myself what animations need to be in a looping animation or ones that need to be one shot. And luckily there's like a really cool website that has all the animations for Mario 64. So I can kind of see what they did and like, oh, the ledge grab needs to kind of like do this certain thing. And they don't even include like the up axis in the animation. Like that's something that you do on your end and stuff. So
right, that's all gameplay dependent.
Yeah.
You know, depending on the amount of gravity, you're going to jump higher and then you're going to have more time to play the jump animation or something. So yeah, there's a lot of gotchas when it comes to like implementing those animations into the gameplay, into the Unity character controller, and how we're like transitioning from different animation states to other animation states based on the conditions of the game, based on the conditions of the player input. And that's all something that I'm learning as well, because a lot of the games that I worked on are like first-person games where you're not dealing with like a player avatar so much. I was working on a lot of VR games in the past where like you are the player avatar, and so it like doesn't really make sense to have an animated player character, because like you're the one animating yourself and you're moving your hands around, and that's what's driving the movement of the character. So this was kind of my first time diving into like deep diving into like Unity character controllers, finite state machines. That's kind of what we're using to handle the different states. But, you know, basically we have the core character controller code that handles movement and gravity and jumping and input. And then based on all these factors, it puts the player character in a different state, and each state is its own script, separate from the character controller script, that defines, okay, what's happening in that state. And in that state, we can override the default settings. So, you know, the player character controller has, you know, gravity in the update loop by default. But if we do something like swimming, for example, then we're not using gravity when we're underwater, because you want to be able to just float in water and without falling down to the bottom. So we can override any of the functions in the character controller and like not have gravity in this state, or not allow the player to move in a certain state. Like if we're playing an animation because they just grabbed an item and we're playing like an animation that says like, oh, they've just collected this item, so we need to stop any movement so that we can be able to play this animation. And that's been a new thing for me. And it's been a bit of a juggling act, because there's so many, for something like a platformer that's so similar to Mario 64, there's like all these different states that have different dependent conditions on how they can enter and exit that state, and what states they're allowed to enter from that state, depending on different conditions, like, you know, whether they're in midair or whether they're on the ground, or whether they've already done a double jump or not. And that's been a bit of a juggling act for me, because it's quite new to me.
We'll be right back after this short message.
Yeah, you! Are you ready to take the magic of the Imagynasium home? Well, come on down to the EXP Shop today. We got shirts, bags, hats and bags, and even more to come.
scheduled programming.
Speaking of implementation, I wanted to dive deeper into like you creating prefabs and all that stuff. I mean, the pipeline from me going to Blender into Unity has been just, I felt like so seamless.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that it's been so seamless, because for me, it's been a pain in the ass. It's been a pain in a good way though, because I'm learning a lot of like really important skills when it comes to Unity editor scripting, specifically like scripting to make the Unity editor do specific things rather than scripting specific things to happen in the game when it's in play mode. Since Kami is so experienced in Blender and not in Unity, I'm doing my best to kind of bridge that gap and make it easy to just really quickly iterate without having to like constantly nudge me and say, hey, Jason, can you set this up, or like configure this, or, you know, add animations to this. And so it started in a really simple way where like we just wanted to get a level imported into Unity, run a script, press play, and be able to run around in the level. And the main important thing for that is collisions. And so the way this started was like I wrote a script that just, you know, it analyzes whatever objects are in the scene, which of those objects have meshes. If it has a mesh, add a mesh collider to it, which is like really simple. It's not super optimized, but it works, right? Like you run the script, it adds mesh colliders to any objects that have meshes. And then as long as you have a player character object in the scene, then the scene loads and you're able to just run around in it and just kind of like see how it feels to just move around in the level. From there, we just kind of kept expanding it, where we started to have interactable items. You know, we have jacks that you pick up, gravitate towards you when you get close enough and make a little sound and everything. The main way that we're doing this is through naming conventions, where you name things in Blender, and then I check the names of the objects in my script, in this editor script that we have. And, you know, if the name is Jack, then we can replace it with a Jack prefab and just make sure that the Jack prefab is in the same location. And since then, we've just kept expanding it to include more and more prefabs for like the different collectibles. We've added enemies to this. We've added like lighting adjustments, because lighting in Blender versus Unity is quite different. And so there's like an equation to make sure that the power of the lighting and the intensity is like roughly the same between the two. I don't remember exactly what that algorithm is. Yeah. Maybe I can like figure that out and like we can include it in here, because it might be like a useful number for some people. But in the end, it's like Kami's able to just work on a level in Blender and literally just like save the blend file, because that's what we're using in Unity. Like Unity has a blend file importer that converts it to FBX in the background. And so you can just kind of save the blend file and tab over to Unity and then just run this script and press play and be able to really test it out, be able to, you know, it automatically bakes a nav mesh for enemies to use. It automatically sets up moving platforms based on like animations that you might have created in Blender and environment animations, and it sets up like a generic avatar for that kind of stuff. And it's been able to help us iterate really quickly. Even though it's a lot of work to set up a script like this and to do a lot of like custom adaptations to the stuff that you're doing in Blender, it saves me a lot of time, because you don't have to come to me and say, hey, Jason, can you set up this blend file in Unity so that we can test the level out every time you iterate on the level. You can just do all of that on your own, and I can just iterate on the script that prepares it. So that's been a really cool way for us to just keep this ball rolling and just keep moving, especially when it comes to level design. And I think that's something that is just really, really beneficial for, like, it's personally beneficial for us, but I think for other teams, there's something that people can take away from this is that, you know, if you're working between a Unity developer and a Blender modeler, animator who doesn't know Unity so well, there's ways that you can bridge that gap to just make it this like seamless, pretty much one-step process There's a lot of like weird quirks, especially about the Unity editor scripts, where like you have to have the script itself that you attach to the game object. Then you have to have the editor script, which kind of like lives in the background and isn't actually in the scene, but it's still affecting things. And then certain things don't really work in play mode, or don't really work when you're not in play mode. So you have to like, you know, add a little tag to like execute in edit mode. There's a few things, especially with like the blend file, and like, you know, the blend file is kind of used as a prefab, or it gets put into the scene as sort of like a prefab instance. And there's a bunch of stuff about like marking the prefab as dirty. This dirty prefab. We gotta like make sure that all of our stuff is dirty so that we can actually save the changes that I'm making with this editor script. I guess, you know, marking it as dirty is kind of signaling to Unity that like, hey, this has been changed. So like make sure that these changes stay that way, because a lot of the changes that you make like in play mode, when you exit play mode, they don't stick. And so there's certain things like that even in the editor script where you kind of have to like notify Unity that like, hey, we're changing this, so don't revert it once we finish what we're doing, because we're changing it for a reason, dude. And that's been a pain in the butt.
Got it, dude.
Well, yeah, so thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Adios.
Adios,
Farewell.
amigos.
Auf Wiedersehen.
You can follow me and all my stuff at KamiEXP. I also have a website, KamiEXP.com. And
You're not going to do the jingle?
what was it? KamiEXP.com. Visit today.
Yeah.
And where can people find you?
Jason of the Storm. Find me on Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. I hope to be posting more about the game on my accounts, but, you know, really Kami is the director of this whole thing.
Been light on the salt as well. I don't feel like we have been posting too much, but hopefully that will start to kick up more.
Yeah, it's hard to post content about the game when we're like so focused on working on the game. You know, those are two very different things. And, you know, while we're cruising, working on the game, it's like, it's a lot to just kind of figure out what we're gonna post about it on the side. So bear with us in that respect.
Also, join the Discord, the KamiEXP Discord.
The Kami Gang.
The Kami Gang
Discord.
We are not affiliated with any gangs or any gang violence, just to let you know. It's peaceful.
Yeah, join our Discord. We have a, what is it, a Ko-fi? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know how to say it. Coffee, I guess, because it's kind of meant to be coffee. Right?
Hey, give me a cup of coffee.
Coffee.
Give me a cup of coffee.
So, you know, donate to our coffee page, so we can get some money from you guys. If you want to throw us some money, you know, no pressure.
We're desperate.
If you really like what we're doing and you want to help us out, that's the best way to help us out. What else?
I think that's it. All right. Well, yeah. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
EXP.com. Visit today.